Hi and Assalamualaikum my dear audiences. Would you believe that two people are made for each other even though they initially hated one another? Is there such thing as destined to be together? If you say yes, please allow me, DAHLIA AFIFA BINTI MOHAMAD ZAINUDDIN from SBPI Sabak Bernam to present the book in question, Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. In 307 pages, will we witness the love tale between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. Shall we dive into the story now? Pride and Prejudice starts off with the narration of a ball at the town of Meryton. This Meryton ball is where Elizabeth Bennet met Mr. Darcy. At first, all of the Bennet sisters were eager to attend the ball. Elizabeth Bennet perhaps most of all. Elizabeth Bennet, known as Lizzie, is the female protagonist in this book. She is a straightforward woman who has the courage to speak her words. Yet, words alone were enough to give her a terrible view of others. For example, she promptly agreed that Mr. Darcy is a horrible person after she only heard a one-side story about how Mr. Darcy treated Mr. Wickham unfairly out of jealousy. Her prejudice towards Mr. Darcy starts here, and that is why she is the epitome of prejudice in this book. Although she is self-sufficient, I believe that her way of thinking is awful. As for Mr. Darcy, he quickly drew the attention at the ball with his stunning figures. However, his manner gave a disgust after he insulted the woman at the ball for not being attractive enough for his high standard. With that, he was perceived unworthy to be compared with his best friend, Mr. Bingley, who was amiable and warm. Isn't Mr. Darcy a little cheesy? He's a good-looking man but with bad personality. In this book, he's the embodiment of pride. My dear listeners, Pride and Prejudice continues with Lizzie overheard Mr. Darcy evaluated her as undesirable enough to dance with. I could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified mine, she remarked. The hatred between them sparked by their first unpleasant meeting at the ball. Yet, they were forced to confront each other though, because it was destined for them to be associated by each other in this hatred to love journey. When Lydia Bennet, Lizzie's sister, ran away with Mr. Wickham after being led to believe that he would marry her, but it was the opposite in the reality. They were made to marry by Mr. Darcy, who acted in secret in order to protect Lizzie and the rest of the family's reputation. Lizzie was so embarrassed when she found out about this. This abruptly broke the wall of enmity between Lizzie and Mr. Darcy. And it was at this point a spark of interest sparked beneath Mr. Darcy's pride and Lizzie's prejudice, the only two things that keep them apart. My dear listeners, would love eventually come before the pride and prejudice? This is your task to find out. Well, there must be reasons for me to like this book. And one of it is that Mr. Bennet, Lizzie's father, did not push her to accept marriage proposals that she did not want. In my opinion, his actions were heartwarming and admirable, especially when marriage is a serious matter and women have rights in this regard. I also love how the writer attempted to express the price of pride in her writing. To some extent, pride is understandable, but excessive pride is costly. Pride cost Mr. Darcy Lizzie at first, and he would not be a good spouse for Lizzie until he learned to temper his pride. Then, there is the cost of prejudice, which Lizzie had developed swiftly and deeply as a result of her observation. Because of her prejudice, she judged Mr. Darcy unjustly until she saw how irrational she had been. Next, the writer also differentiates between the wealthy gentry and those who are unfortunate. He's a gentleman and I'm a gentleman's daughter. So far, we are equal. Lizzie calmly responded after she was deemed unsuitable to be Mr. Darcy's wife. The writer is clearly mocking people who are overly concerned about their social and financial status. As a whole, I'm sure that everyone is going to love the satire that the writer employed in her writing, as I'm fond of them. For me, Pride and Prejudice urges me to have just the right amount of pride and prejudice that is not destructive to myself. At last, let's enjoy the roller coaster ride full of emotions coming from Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. I wish you all a thrill of satisfaction at the end of the ride. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Yours, very sincerely, Dahlia.